Temperatures, they're very important to know and there's a lot of them out there. The purpose of this video is to tell you the temperatures that you have to know and you have to memorize in order to run an effective shift. So let's start off with some cooking temperatures. The first temperature we all know, we learned in grade school, freezing. To freeze a product, it has to be under 32 degrees. Boiling has to be 212 degrees or higher, where a simmer is going to be 185 to 205 degrees Fahrenheit. So knowing the difference between boiling and simmering is huge. Let's say you're doing a big batch of product in a tilt skillet, and the tilt skillet lets you choose the temperature. Knowing the difference between a boil and a simmer can dramatically change the outcome of the food. So oftentimes the recipe will tell you to simmer something, or it might tell you to boil something. So by knowing the actual temperature to set your tilt skillet to, that's a big deal. So know the difference between those two temperatures. Braising is another one to know. Braising is going to be 275 degrees to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. What braising is covering a food with liquid to let it cook slowly in your oven. If you braise your meat too quickly, it's going to be overcooked and it's just going to fall apart as soon as you pick it up. When you braise your meats, you want it to be fork tender. You want to be able to tear it off easily with a fork, but you don't want it to get to the point where when you lift it up, it just all falls apart. If your oven is too cool, it's just never going to get to the point where it's fork tender. So you want to make sure that your braising temperature is something that you know and something that you can use in the field. Steak temperatures. Your rare steak is going to be 120 to 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Your mid-rare is going to be 130 to 135 degrees Fahrenheit. Your medium is going to be about 135 to 145 degrees Fahrenheit. Your mid-well is going to be 145 to 155 degrees Fahrenheit. And your well done is going to be 155 to 165 degrees Fahrenheit. Now when I was just starting out, I actually didn't know these on the top of my head, and I had a job interview that I didn't get the job just because I didn't know this. So ever since that day, I made sure that I had these memorized. You're basically just going up the chart in 10-degree increments. So as long as you know what the temperature of rare, you can just count up 10 degrees for each temperature and you essentially know where you're at when you're cooking. And make sure when you're cooking your meats, if you're actually going to temp them with a probe, that the probe is going in the thickest part of the steak or the meat or whatever you're cooking, and that the center tip is in the fattest part. You need to know exactly what temperatures foods are safe to eat at. Your chicken and poultry has to be at least 165 for it to be safe. You can't have any pink in the middle of your chicken. Your fishes and your porks, you can usually cook to 140 or medium. Something like ground beef, it's recommended that it gets at least to 155. Veal and lamb is also going to be going medium, so that'll be about 140. Again, it's going to be right there with your fish. And if you're reheating foods, it needs to get at least to 165 degrees. It needs to be held there for at least 15 seconds. When I'm smoking meats, I like to have my smoker set at 225 to about 250 degrees Fahrenheit. Having the perfect temperature is going to allow the meat not only to absorb all the smoke, but it's also going to make sure that it's nice and fork tender. Now let's talk about what temperatures we're setting our grill at. It depends on the protein and the thickness of the protein. So if I'm cooking something like steak, it's going to be a very hot grill. I'm going to have mine between 500 and 550. If I have a really thin steak, it's going to be on the higher end of that scale. But if the steak's a little bit fatter, it's going to be on the colder end. More delicate proteins such as chicken and fish, I'm actually going to lower my temperature from 500 to 550, and I'm going to take that down to about 400 to 450. So about 100-degree difference there. I want to make sure that I have the perfect color char marks on my steak. That's why I want my grill hotter with steak. But if I'm going to bring it down to more delicate proteins, I don't want the marks quite as dark, so I'm going to lower the temperature of the grill. Your fryer, you want between 350 and 375. If your fryer is too cold, all the food is going to be soggy because it's just going to absorb the grease. But if it's too hot, it's also going to get too dark. So 350 to 375, that's really where you want it for most products. Now let's discuss food safety. I already have a lot of videos out about food safety, proper tooling. Go check those videos out, but generally you want to know that the temperature danger zone is 41 degrees to 135 degrees. That's going to be one of the most important temperatures that you know. All cold food has to be below 41 degrees. All hot food has to be above 135 degrees. So if I'm looking at something like a steam well that's holding a soup or a hot product, I'm holding my steam well a little bit above 135. So I'm holding my steam well between about 145 to 155. If you get any hotter than that, it's going to start breaking down your product. So if you have something like soup in your steam well, you're going to start to see it separate and get oily. That's not what we want. So if we go too hot, that's what we're going to get. And if we go too cold, it's going to fall into danger zone. So 145 to 155 for your soups and anything else being held hot. For my fridges and line units, I'm keeping those about 36 degrees to about 38 degrees. You gotta think about it. When you're cooking and it's hot and you're opening and closing doors, the temperature of the unit's gonna increase during service. So you want it to be colder than 41 degrees. That way, when you're in the middle of a busy service and we're opening those doors, we have a few degrees to play with. So 36 degrees to 38 is gonna be right where you want your cold units. The wash cycle on your dish machine needs to reach at least 160 degrees Fahrenheit, and your rinse needs to be at least 180 degrees Fahrenheit. But sometimes machines are different, so sometimes your rinse won't have to be that high as long as you have a sanitizing solution. The next thing you have to be cautious of is sanitizing solution. Something like sanitizing solution, when it's diluted with water, can actually get killed if the water's too hot. So you want to keep your sanitizing solution on the colder end, between 65 and 80 degrees in most cases. Another pro tip I have for you is with your floor chemicals. If you're cleaning your floors and you're putting hot water with the chemicals, that'll actually hurt you in the long run. I know it's easier to get grease off floors with piping hot water, but the cold water is actually necessary for most floor cleaners. Most floor cleaners these days, especially if they're commercial grade, have components in there that actually kills and repels bugs and rodents. So if you use hot water, it's gonna kill that chemical and bugs and rodents are gonna start coming into your establishment. So what I would do when I'm mopping my floors is I would first hit it with hot water, get all the hot water off the floor, and then I would do a second round with cold water and the chemical. And that way it's nice, clean, it smells fresh, and it's gonna repel your bugs and rodents. Hand sinks need to be at least 110 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The health department will hit you on this. So make sure you are always monitoring your sinks, and every time you wash your hands, if the water doesn't get hot, make note of it and get it fixed. Last one I want to bring up is cooling procedures. There's a video coming out shortly on cooling procedures because it's very, very important. And honestly, there is something in cooling procedures that nobody knows about, and that every time I go into a restaurant, they're doing it wrong. So check out that video so you know exactly how to cool correctly. So once the food hits 135 degrees, you have 2 hours to cool it down to 71 degrees Fahrenheit, and from there you have 4 hours to get down to 41 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is what I'm looking out for on my shift. I always make sure I have a probe in my pocket and I'm temping everything that I can throughout my day. By memorizing these temperatures, not only is your food going to be better and more consistent, you're also going to be running a safe and clean kitchen. So just memorizing and spending time with this information is going to be very, very important. It's going to be something that's going to get you to that next level. So if you didn't know any of these temperatures, just carve out 10 to 15 minutes out of your day, sit down and learn these. If you have any questions or anything else you want to add to this list, go ahead and leave it in the comments. I'm sure everyone in the community would love to read what you have to say about this. And if you're new here, please subscribe. It goes a long way of helping me achieve my goals of positively impacting the careers of kitchen employees around the country.